All right, we're live. So welcome back to the third episode of Isolation Education. I'm excited to have Scott with me. Scott we first met when he was my mentor for the ACE student workshop. And I got to see firsthand how he kind of sees creativity in the industry. So I'm excited today for his presentation, and welcome, Scott.
Hi, how's it going?
So
yeah.
I know you got a bit of an introduction prepared, so I will let you roll on with the show, and we'll get your slides put up here.
Well, you don't want to chat first? You don't want to just shoot the shit?
Well, we can do whatever.
I'm just kidding. We just went through this.
Share while you put your presentation up.
Oh yeah, I guess it would be smart if I did that. Hey. Yeah, thanks for having me. Today I'll talk about this slide that you see in front of you, and hopefully everybody can see it out in the world. And it's called How I Evaluate Creative. And it was interesting because Josh had asked me the question, hey, I have this, like, how I would like to get you on for the, the podcast. And he asked me the question, how do you evaluate creative? And I'm like, I don't know. I've never been asked that question before, and I'd never really formalized like any kind of like distilled version of what it is that I do. So it's cool. Like I found it challenging to kind of like take everything that I think I know and put it into this presentation. So I mean, obviously I called it How I Evaluate Creative, and it's told by a red marker. Hopefully that makes sense as to why that is. So yeah, I am Scott. My name is Scott Steele, but by now you know this. And I am an associate creative director at ZGM in Edmonton. We have two offices, one in Calgary and one here in Edmonton. And essentially my role is, I sit kind of underneath the creative director, and I manage the creative department. So I resource individual designers and copywriters and stuff like that, and also evaluate creative and try and do the best job I can in that realm. But at ZGM specifically, my associate creative director role is actually director of visual execution. So we've kind of changed the name of my title a little bit there. Because we don't kind of call ourselves the creative department, we call ourselves a storytelling department, which is kind of an interesting way to do it, because we think we tell stories, or we do tell stories through visuals and through copy and through headlines and all that sort of stuff. So my job there, what makes it a little bit different than traditional ACD is that I focus on getting the best result out of the way things look and our visual representation of a project. And that's my job. So I'm kind of across both offices doing that. Yeah, so that's kind of my role. I wear an extraordinary amount of hats at ZGM. Part of the reason why I am the director of visual execution is because I kind of have dipped my toe into basically every single visual medium you can imagine and beyond, from art direction, design, animation, editing. I'm the official voiceover artist for Rohit Communities, and do my own audio and stuff like that, and just like a little bit of everything. I was even a mascot, and at one point our team stuffed me into a track kayaks bag for a campaign. And if you want to know about those stories, the mascot story and the kayak story, just ask me sometime. But yeah, so I wear many hats and I do many things, and that's why I've done everything to do with visuals in my career, and it's been fun. But the one thing I am not is I am not a copywriter. If you want to hear a cool story about copywriting, you can go check out Collins on this channel, who was, when was he? A few days ago? Yeah, go check that out. He's from FKA. And So this presentation is going to be about evaluating art. So if the combination is art and copy, I handle the art side of marketing and advertising creative in our agency. So that's what I will be focusing on my evaluations on. Yeah. So like I said, there's I've never really distilled this down into any sort of concrete approach before. So this is all new to me too. And you won't be able to Google this because the three levels of creative evaluation don't exist. They're just in my head. But I hope they're insightful, and I hope you get something out of it, even if you're not in the creative department. But yeah, so I've distilled them down into three levels of creative evaluation, and I'll just talk about the first one right now. So level one, is there an idea? So at ZGM, we're an idea-based creative agency. So everything we do should be grounded in some sort of truth. And I'll get into that a little bit more later. There are many different kinds of ideas out there, and some are better than others. In this case, if you want a little bit of insight into what I think makes for a good idea, capture farts in a bottle and profit sounds pretty great to me. And now you know a little bit more about me than you did before. So at ZGM, there are kind of two ways that we approach ideas at our agency. And the first one is design with an idea. And in general terms, that just means the design or look came before the idea. And we developed an idea out of the visual approach. It's usually pretty cool or clever. And essentially what I mean by that is it's not like this like world-changing idea. It's more of like something clever, something cheeky, something fun, something exciting to look at. And it's not a true idea, but it's kind of like it's clever. It's kind of what I'm getting at. But generally, the idea is secondary to the design. So what makes up a good design idea? There's lots of approaches to this, and there's probably lots of solutions to a good design idea. But the one that I've kind of seen the most, or the one that we use the most, essentially, is a good design idea would be like one part this and one part that. And I know that's super general, and I'll try and explain that a little bit. If you think about logo design and logo designers, and you think about the clever ones that you've seen in your life, it's usually something like Red Fish Restaurant or something along those lines. Or perhaps it's like Fire Sushi, and it's at like another restaurant for some reason. Or like Pixel Cup Studios. Well, the thing about those is like they take these two parts and kind of like smush them together. Like Red Fish Restaurant would be like a red fish as an icon that went above the logo, or above the words or whatever. Fire Sushi, you can imagine like a fireball sushi or something like that. And they're just smushing these two things together. And the easiest way you can explain it is with like logo names, and like that's what you see, and they go, oh, that's so cool and so clever how they came up with that. But it's really just like one part this and one part that. So here's an example of a campaign idea that we did that kind of came about from this idea of design as the lead. And it's this is a poster for a campaign that we did for the Starlight Casino in Edmonton, and it's for a section of that casino called Replay. And the unique thing about Replay was it's kind of a cordoned off area that it's kind of it's like you go there with your friends and it's kind of relaxed. You go in front of a terminal and you can play games on a screen. And then there's this section, there's this giant media wall that you're facing. And in front of that is like the dealers, and there's a bunch of dealers or whatever, and you're playing a game on your computer screen and they're kind of dealing for that particular game or whatever. But they're called dealer-tainers. So they're not just dealing, they're also entertaining. So another one of those examples of like two things coming together to create something new. And so when we were briefed on, we kind of knew that this was something. And essentially what it was that it's like half casino, half nightclub is where we landed with it. And when we were talking about the creative portion of it, we're like, well, let's see what we can come up with there. And so like we looked at sketches on the wall and stuff like that, and a bunch of our creatives had a bunch of concepts and everything. And it was cool. Like there was one sketch that in particular that was just it was a dancing king and queen. And I went through and I looked at it and I was like, yeah, that's really cool. That would make for a really great campaign. Let's focus on that and see what we can come up with. So it was a sketch. It was a sketch that kind of informed the overall campaign and what we ended up doing with it. And that's kind of an example of like a design idea coming to light. And this is the end result of that effort. There was a whole bunch of other things, like we had like dice that had music notes on it instead of the little dots and stuff like that. But yeah, it was like, in this case, that idea was one part this and one part that, one part nightclub, one part casino, and then all the artwork and creative kind of spilled out from there. And here's just a couple more examples. We did the king and we did a jack and we did a bunch of stuff. We did a full deck of cards with these characters on them. And that was pretty cool. And we animated them and stuff and actually made them dance because that was kind of the original idea. Yeah, so that's kind of that one. And then the second option that we use, which is generally the stronger of the two options, is to start with an idea. And we do this by focusing on truths. And essentially what I mean by that is like the best sort of ideas that you'll see come from something honest, something that's relatable and something that you know, like people can latch on to. So like if the other example is just something that's cool to look at, it doesn't really have a lot of staying power. You know, it's just kind of like, oh yeah, that's a cool execution. The real goal is to build out ideas based on human truths. And there's lots of ways to do this, but like our company would focus on the humanity side of it. So things that are just relatable to human beings in general. So we did a campaign for the Alberta Fire Chiefs Association, and essentially what happened here is we got the truth that the carbon monoxide alarm is the most ignored device in your home, and that's what this is. It's a carbon monoxide alarm, and that we had lots of truths for this campaign, and the campaign was to get people testing their alarms more often because the carbon monoxide can kill you. So, you know, they call it the silent killer. One of the reasons why it's silent, or not really, but one of the reasons why it's silent is because, you know, your carbon monoxide alarm, like nobody ever tests it. It wouldn't be silent if your alarm worked properly. So yeah, like that was our task, and we ended up with the truth that it's the most ignored device in your home. And the idea we came up with ended up being pretty obvious, that in order to get people to test more often, we needed to make it the least ignored device in your home. Yeah, and so we did that. We had all of that on screen, on like a wall and stuff like that, and did our sketches and everything. And then Brooke, one of our designers, did a sketch of googly eyes on a carbon monoxide alarm. Again, it's like, that's it. That's the one. It's got to be that, because I've never seen that before. It's totally unique. So yeah, it's cool. Like it just ended up being this weird, strange thing with a real honest truth about not testing your carbon monoxide alarms as much as you possibly should. And yeah, it's fun, it's friendly. You could do fear tactics if you wanted to do, but that probably wouldn't work. This is just more engaging. But the creative, we could have done the creative in a bunch of different ways based on the idea, which is kind of the difference too. Yeah, so like if we're trying to make it less ignorable, then yeah, it didn't have to be googly eyes and mustaches and dressing them up. It could have been any other number of things to make it less like totally unignorable. But this is just the execution that we chose. So it wasn't led with the design, it was led with the idea. That's essentially what I'm getting at. And here were some other versions of this. We did video, we did a whole bunch of different approaches for this. If you've seen it, that's great. If not, you should check it out because it was really unique and a lot of fun to do. And we paired it with this kind of straight copy, which is like whatever it takes, it's worth it. So if the subject matter was pretty goofy, the actual, like what we're saying isn't, and that was kind of important too. But yeah, so that was 2 examples of idea-driven design and a little bit of evaluation in there. We need that in our stuff. Level 2, on to level 2, is the creative on brief. So generally when we get briefed on a project from the accounts team, it comes with parameters. And that can be a number of different things. Things like we have to take into account that it has an existing brand. So it's going to have colors and logos and stuff like that. We can't just, make up whatever we want. And that seems pretty obvious, but you'd be surprised how often people stray from that path. So I have a little bit of an analogy on some things on like what we shouldn't do, I guess. So let's pretend that the client brief is make a new logo for Cats R Us. And they only have one mandatory, no dogs. There can't be any dogs, please. But you'd be surprised at how many times something like this comes up. Obviously, this is a fairly extreme example, and what a horrible looking dog. But yeah, it's like you didn't pay attention to the brief. You didn't focus on what they were trying to say. The client is not a dummy. You shouldn't try to, push your agenda on the client. A dog is not a cat. A cat is a cat. And I know that seems super obvious, but some people, they try so hard to get their own agenda into creative. So one of the things I evaluate is to make sure that doesn't happen. It's taking parameters that are set in front of you and working within them to create something unique. It's like for the carbon monoxide thing, we weren't allowed to use a smoke detector or we weren't allowed to use the word detector. We had to use alarm, but I kept calling it a detector the whole way through because I'm just not used to it. So we really had to focus in on making sure that we stayed within certain parameters for that campaign. Otherwise, we're going to get fired. And it's just a job in the end, and we can screw that job up. This is much better. I know it's not cat's anus, but they only had one problem. They only had one parameter, and it was to make sure that there's a cat. So let's play within that realm of what you can do. What are the possibilities? And in this case, first thing that came to my mind was showing a cat's anus. Hooray. On brief, it gets a big check mark from me. Right. So that's the on brief section. Level 3, does it look and feel great? That seems pretty obvious too. But yeah, this is broken down into a bunch of different sections. The first one being, does it meet or surpass today's design standards? And that's pretty important and kind of the benchmark. So yes, I'm a pretty loose personality when it comes to what makes for certain great creative or whatever, and everyone's different and everyone has their own opinions on design, and that's all great and fine, but there is a benchmark. There is a line in that if it goes lower than that, there are rules. I did go to school for this kind of thing, where it's it has to meet a certain level of quality, and if it doesn't meet that, then we're going to start having chats about it. Generally speaking, at our agency, I never have to worry about this because it always meets at least the base level design standards that are set out. Yeah, but we wanted to surpass, obviously. The second part of this is, does it feel right? And this is like a completely ambiguous statement, but um, there's just something not quite right with the creative, and then it's like you don't let that pass. Um, you you have to, like, if it doesn't feel right, there's something wrong. Especially once you get more into your career, later into your career, maybe you can't put your finger on exactly what the thing is that's wrong with it. Whatever it is, whether it's a, color or shape, or does this go there? Does that go up there? You never know. But you'll nail it. You just got to give it some time, let it rest a little bit, and then come back and reevaluate and work together to come up with a solution if you're working with a partner on it. Third evaluation, at least for myself, is like, am I inspired by whatever it is that the person is presenting to me? And this is a really good sign. It's like, if I can't do it better, and that's not like to boost my own ego or anything like that. I can do it better than anybody else. No, but I'm advanced enough in my career that I can probably do most things. And if I get inspired by something, then I know that it's on the right track. And I'm evaluating it from that lens. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is so great. I can't do this better. So that's my benchmark. If people are surpassing that, and they often do, often do, then it's inspiring. It's a great way to work. And it's a great way to, to talk to a creative after the fact about it too. It's like, I'm inspired by what you just did. And that makes them super stoked to be working on it. And I try to evaluate that way as well. Another way that I evaluate stuff is the creative crowd, and I mean the creative person. Proud of the work that they've done. And I think sometimes this gets missed. It's like, oh, you did a great job. Congratulations, pat you on the back. But maybe they didn't feel like they put their all into it or whatever. It's good to evaluate where the person who's making it is at in the process. It's like, well, I get this a lot, where they'll say, so what do you think of it? And I'm like, well, I like it. I think it's pretty cool. I think you've done a great job. It's like, then I'll just respond by saying, well, what do you think of it? And they'll either go, yeah, I don't know. Or they'll go, yeah, no, I'm happy. I'm proud of it. And then we want the proud side. We don't want the, meh, I don't know. Because if we've got the meh, then they're not finding the work that they do rewarding. And that's a problem. And then the fifth one here is like, is it original? Like, it's not like the most important aspect. I'd rather have people who are proud of the work that they do rather than have to make something original, because it's hard. If you follow the sort of idea angles, like the two ways to do ideas, you'll get more original creative, because you're not basing it off of like what you've seen out in the world. You're basing it off of an idea that you had that doesn't exist anywhere else. So it's important, but not mandatory. But it's definitely high up there. It's like, if it can be original and great and serve all the client's needs and stuff, then that's awesome. And if I go and I can't find that anywhere on any of the sources, or like Behance, or any advertising annuals or anything like that, if it doesn't exist in the world, then that's like the pinnacle of awesome art direction and creative for me. But it's not mandatory. And those are the three ways that I evaluate creative. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. I just think it's most important to put people first. Let people explore, step in when you have to, but it's not life or death. So here's some notes for creative leaders and creatives in general, but just other ways to evaluate yourself and evaluate, the creative process and all that stuff, and just things to remember in general. Don't follow trends, design to the idea. So kind of like what I was saying, if you want to have original creative stuff that's kind of never been done before or whatever, don't go to the well first. Don't go to what other people have done first. Take your brief, think about the brief, write stuff out, and then start thinking about it without applying art to it, or bringing art into the equation. And then start, like, once you've kind of gotten an idea, then you can start applying a look to it, because then it'll be more unique, because it'll be tailored to the idea, which is much better. Just because you didn't do it doesn't mean it's bad. And that's just like, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Is that like an appropriate saying to use these days? I don't know. But yeah, it's true though. Like, I have like my own personal biases towards creative. I have my own things that I like, but I try not to bring them into critiques, because there's more than one way to do it. And just because I like one way doesn't mean that the other way isn't as good or better than what I can do or could come up with. I need to be able to understand that. And I need to be able to respect the creative process from other creatives that aren't me. Don't make lateral tweaks. So yeah, this is just going sideways. Yeah, so like, I see this, maybe I don't see it a lot, but it can happen quite a bit, is where you can tweak things to death. And there's no necessary reason for it other than like trying to put your stamp on something that you really don't need to put your stamp on. You can move the logo a millimeter to the right, or you can change the color to be like slightly less blue, or you could do a whole bunch of these like lateral moves that in the end don't make any difference. If you're gonna evaluate and critique work, your critique should have a pretty big impact on whatever it is that you're talking about. Little tiny tweaks don't make a hell of a lot of difference. And sometimes they can. I'm not going to say don't ever make tweaks, because some things just need to be lined up and some things need to be, visually right. But that goes back to just the general graphic design rules. I'm talking about people who don't necessarily know what they're talking about, making the tweaks and just putting their personal spin on somebody else's work. It's not usually life or death. We have great jobs. Working in marketing is awesome. It can be extremely stressful. Don't get me wrong. I've been on pills for anxiety and all that kind of stuff. It can be extraordinarily stressful. And sometimes you think you're taking the whole world on your shoulders. But that's just not true. It's definitely not life or death. And like, maybe more now than it's ever been with COVID and stuff like that, I had to put the usually in there because, if you're working in this industry now, you're like actually making a difference. And it's kind of a rewarding time to be working, because it is like life or death in a lot of scenarios. But in general, you don't have to take the weight of the world on your shoulder. It's like the universe doesn't come crashing down. You still just like, you get a paycheck and, you do your job as good as you can. You should still take time for yourself and all that. And don't ever impose life or death on your team ever, like ever. That's just wrong. Offer suggestions. This seems extremely obvious, but lots of people don't. They say, do this or do that, move that there and do this and put that there. I try not to do, I do a little bit of that, obviously, but mostly I just want to offer suggestions and it's not a great learning experience for people when you force them down a path. It's better for creatives to kind of come up with their own solutions to problems. And that's what makes them stronger creatives. So it's better to offer suggestions rather than direction. That doesn't really make sense. Oops. But offer suggestions. Don't be like overly directive. Don't fucking hover. Stop it. We've all seen the art director trope, so maybe you haven't, but generally what I'm talking about is like the group hover over somebody. It's dumb. The best course of action is to either review creative in a different room or like roll up, like sit around in a circle and chat. It's like nobody wants you to be hovering over them. It's an invasion of personal space, and stop it. I don't know what that has to do with evaluating creative, but I guess you would be evaluating creative in that scenario. So yeah, don't do that. And then the last one here is don't use a red marker on creative work. I hated this. It's like, this isn't school. You're not being graded. It's life. It's real life. And it's people's work that you're drawing on. I think I have done this a few times, but more as a joke. But in general, the thought is don't use a red marker on creative work, because it's just kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Insulting, really. And some people put a precedent on insulting their creatives because they think that they'll get a better result out of them, and that's not the case. You should never do that. Essentially, this presentation could have been called "Don't Be a Douchebag," but I decided to call it "How to Evaluate Creative" instead. Yeah, so that's it, Josh. I hope I didn't like cut out or anything like that.
No, that was perfect. Yeah, that was awesome. I remember the first time I think we met, I asked you like any advice you'd have for recent students, and the first thing you said was, "Yeah, don't be a dick." Plain and simple.
Yeah, no, it's fun.
So for the Q&A, if anyone has any questions, just feel free to shoot them in the chat. Paige Simpson commented this. I don't know if you saw that, Scott.
Oh, no. Yeah. Thanks. Right on.
So I do have some questions for you. So my first one was for students that are like interested in learning from, other sources. Do you have any like personal people that you follow or creatives that inspired you like early on in your creative days?
Oh yeah, I think there's definitely people you gravitate towards. I don't know. I kind of have this thing where I don't really remember, like in terms of like looking outside of my own, like where I work. I don't really like have particular people that I gravitate towards. I'm like, that's cool and that's cool and that's cool, but I don't like attach myself to individuals, or like I don't have celebrity crushes on creative directors or art directors or anything like that in the world, or famous ones, or like, oh, I work at Rethink and that's cool. Right on. Good job. Yeah, like I don't know the names of other big agents, Whedon and Kennedy. It's like, I don't care. But what I will say is, like, in my life, I've had mentors for sure. Like even not like, even people who have technically been under me have like been inspiring to me. My creative director, Kurt, is like partly the reason why I want to do this stuff and like talk on podcasts. So if you ever get a chance to talk to him about this kind of stuff, he'd be very insightful with his experience for sure. Yeah, does that answer your question? Kind of like, I had like a couple creative directors who were inspiring to me, and
like more so mentors than.
Yeah, they were more mentors. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't think he'd be big on like the celebrity, big shot creative people.
But that exists though. Like that's a thing. Like there are people who are like super celebrities in the industry, but I don't care.
Yeah. Well, do you think that's like a kind of a issue that people like? I feel like when people put people in that kind of like superhero category because they're like creative, like that seems kind of weird, because like everyone can be creative in one way or another, just maybe not drawing or like illustration, but also that's kind of fun that people treat these people like they're somehow gods.
Yeah, and I don't know. Maybe people do, maybe people don't, or I don't really know all that much, but yeah, I don't think it's wrong. No, I think that if people however you get inspired by stuff to make you a better creative, the thing that I wouldn't want people to take away is that like the ladder climbing mentality, like, oh, in order to get to that person's position, I'm gonna have to like do all of these horrible things to get there. I don't think that that's the case. And I could elaborate on horrible things, but I don't think anybody wants to hear me talk about horrible things.
No, no. I guess so. Last question. You talked about doing some like really impactful work during the COVID times. Do you want to just like expand on what that experience has been like?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because like we've all of our clients have had to do 180s, right? In their marketing to kind of like send out different messaging. Like one example would be Full House Lottery, which we were doing this big giant this is the one campaign, like, you know, just big thing. And then this whole thing happened. And one of the aspects of, you know, Full House Lottery is we were talking about vacations for life. But nobody wants to, you know, go on vacation, or you can't anyways.
Yeah.
So like ticket sales are just, you know, it's like gonna plummet. So we had to focus and decided to focus more on the cause angle, which is what I would have essentially loved to do anyways. Like that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, is to try and make a difference in people's lives. So we got to like really hone in on what that cause stuff was and kind of do this 180 on it. And it's proud work because you feel like you're actually making a difference. And like Royal Alexandra Hospital comes in, we need a you know, campaign overnight, and they're like, I made them seem scared. They're not scared, but you know, they're like, we want to get this out, and we need to make an impact right now. So like, we're working under these intense timeline pressures, and trying to put out really honest, great creative all at the same time. And it works. Like, it's like, because it's like you feel like you're making the world a better place. It's easy to, you know, spend a lot of time working on this kind of stuff. And you're doing it. Like we've done like 50 different COVID campaigns or something like that. And they've all been a little bit different, and it's been interesting and fun to work in that way. And then to be separated is an interesting way to work too. It's very strange.
That would be tough, especially in the creative department too, because I feel like you rely a lot on seeing like the tangible aspects and like even working together on a lot of things. But
yeah, no, you do. It's been, well, it's actually worked remarkably well. I mean, thank God for this kind of stuff, right? Where you can actually still see the other person. Like, imagine being like on the phone.
Yeah.
We're in an epidemic. Can you explain what that looks like? Yeah, it'd be tough, right? So yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I didn't did that answer your question? I'm not sure.
No, yeah. No, you've answered every question I have. So yeah, I will hit end the broadcast, but stay back so we can chat for the after hours portion.
Are you sure people don't want to listen to that?
I don't know.